Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I will be reading to you from The Tower Treasure. It's from 1927, the first in a series of Hardy Boys novels, written under the pseudonym of Franklin W. Dixon. The two teenage boys, Frank and Joe, worked together as a detective team, amateurs still, but occasionally assisting their father, Fenton Hardy, a private investigator. Last episode, Chet's stolen roadster was spotted around town, being used by some thieves. There are more clues, but no solutions in sight. I do readings twice a week. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Chapter 5. Chet's Auto Horn. Fenton Hardy, the internationally famous detective, was reading in the library of his home that evening when his boys tapped on the door. Although he was a busy man, Mr. Hardy was not the type of father who maintains an air of aloofness with his family, the result being that he was on good terms with his boys, as though he were an elder brother. "Come in," he shouted cheerfully, putting aside his book, and when Frank and Joe entered the room, he motioned to a deep leather sofa near the window. "Sit down. What have you been doing all day? Boarding up all the roads in the country, I suppose?" He grinned amiably at them and puffed vigorously at his pipe. "Well, we didn't travel very far today, Dad," Frank replied. We were investigating," prompted Joe. "Aha!" exclaimed Mr. Hardy in mock surprise. "So my boys were investigating, eh? What was it? A murder? A plot to blow up the White House? A train wreck? Something big, I hope." "No, not quite that bad," admitted Frank. "It was a car theft." Mr. Hardy shook his head. "I'm disappointed in you," he said solemnly. "I really am. To think that sons of mine should investigate a car theft? I thought you wouldn't bother about anything less than a murder." His eyes twinkled, and the Hardy boys, who were accustomed to their father's good-natured banter, smiled back at him. "We weren't just practicing detective work, Dad," explained Frank. "You see, Chet Morton's roadster was stolen this morning." "Is that so?" exclaimed Mr. Hardy, genuinely concerned. "That's too bad. Chet was mighty proud of that car, wasn't he?" "Yes, he was, and it hasn't been found yet." "No trace of the thief?" "Well, he tried to hold up the steamboat ticket office after he stole the car." Mr. Hardy whistled. "Well, you have been on a case worthwhile. Tell me all about it." He settled back in his chair while his sons told him the story of the day's doings. When they told of the difference of opinion as to the color of the man's hair, he did not laugh with them, as they had expected, over the argument between Harity and Mr. Brown. On the contrary, he knitted his brows, and his face wore a serious expression. "It wasn't any ordinary auto thief that you were dealing with," he said slowly. "I've no doubt the man who tried to rob the ticket office and the man who almost ran you down on the shore road were one and the same. And the same man stole Chet Morton's car." "Oh, but how about the color of his hair? There must have been two men," said Joe. "Think so?" said his father. "I have my own theories. But then, the average witness is very unreliable. For instance, I'll give you a test. You have each seen Superintendent Norton of Bayport High School. Well, how often?" "About 2,000 or 3,000 times, I guess," answered Frank. "Over a period of 3 years," said his dad. "Well, what color is his hair?" Frank looked blankly at Joe. "Why, it's... Joe scratched his head. "Brown, isn't it?" "I think it's black." "You see," said Mr. Hardy, smiling, "your powers of observation have not been trained. A good detective has to school himself to remember all sorts of little facts like that until it gets to be a habit with him. Both of you have been looking at Mr. Norton for about 3 years, and you don't know the color of his hair. And if I asked you whether he was in the habit of wearing lace shoes or button shoes, you would be stumped altogether. As a matter of fact, Mr. Norton is bald, and he wears a chestnut wig. You never noticed that? He always wears button shoes. He belongs to the Elks, and his favorite author is Dickens." The boys looked at their father in amazement. "But, Dad, you've never met him." "Well, I've never been introduced to him, but I've passed him on the street a number of times. When your powers of observation have been trained as mine have been, It's no trick at all to take away a mental photograph of a man after seeing him once. If you're especially observant, it isn't hard to notice such details as that regarding the wig. A wig never has the same appearance as natural hair. But how do you know he belongs to the Elks? Asked Joe. He wears the Lodge album as a watch chain. And how do you know his favorite author is Dickens? Well, on 3 separate occasions that I met Mr. Norton, I noticed that he was carrying a book. Once it was Oliver Twist, another time it was A Tale of Two Cities, the third time it was David Copperfield. So I judged that his favorite author must be Dickens. Am I right? He always talks Dickens to us at school, said Frank. It's simple enough once you get the habit, remarked Mr. Hardy. You must train yourselves to be observant so that in time you will automatically remember little details about people you meet and places you visited. Now, if Hardy and Mr. Brown had been at all observant, in spite of the fact that they were surprised and frightened, they would have been able to give the police a very thorough description of the man who tried to hold up the steamboat office. And if the man happened to be a professional thief, that description would have helped the officers ascertain who he was, because once a man has served a prison term, his description is kept on file. As it is, all we know about him is that he's probably red-headed. That isn't very much to go on. Oh, I'm afraid Chet hasn't much chance of recovering his roadster, said Joe. Well, you never can tell, remarked his father. It may turn up sometime. Perhaps the thief will get himself into trouble yet. Keep your ears and eyes open. And now, if you don't mind, I have some reports to write. Frank and Joe took the hint and left their father to his work. But although they talked long into the night on possible ways and means of recovering Chet's car, they were able to devise no plan for tracing the thief. And through the week that followed, there were no further clues. Chet had given up all hope of seeing the roadster again. I sure missed the old bus, he told the Hardy boys after school on Friday afternoon. I have to take my chances on catching rides in and out of town now. Why, last night I walked halfway home before a car came along and gave me a lift. Well, Saturday will be a pretty dull day for you now. You just bet your sweet life it'll be dull, said Chet. Nothing to do but sit around the farm. Better come with us tomorrow, suggested Joe. A bunch of us are going fishing up near the dam. You can meet us at the crossroads near Willow River. Oh, good idea, said Chet. What time? 10 o'clock. Fine, I'll be there. Oh, gosh, I see where I get a ride home. There goes a hay wagon, and it's heading right for the next farm. A long wagon rumbled slowly towards the boys. A lean and solemn farmer perched on the front seat, half asleep. The horses dawdled along. That's Lem Billers, the laziest man in 9 counties, said Chet. Watch me have some fun with him. Chet took from his pocket an automobile horn. He had originally bought it for the roadster, but had not had time to install it before the car was stolen. The horn was a new type, very small, but it had a particularly raucous shriek with just a squeeze. The Hardy boys grinned as they saw Chet step out onto the road and swing himself lightly up on the back of the wagon. Mr. Billers was bringing some supplies back to the farm, and Chet was hidden from view by a bag of flour. As the wagon rumbled past, Chet sounded the automobile horn. It shrieked sharply and insistently. Mr. Billers, being a lazy man, did not even look behind. He simply tugged lightly at the reins, and the horses edged over to the side of the road. Having heard the horn, Mr. Billers expected an automobile would pass. But when no car flashed by, he turned indolently in his seat and looked behind. The roadway was clear. There was not an automobile in sight. He did not see Chet, doubled up with laughter on the back of the wagon. He gazed doubtfully at the Hardy boys, who were standing at the curb trying to conceal their smiles. Could have swore I heard a horn, grunted Mr. Billers. Then he tugged at the lines and brought the horses into the middle of the road again. Instantly the horn shrieked again. This time it was even louder and more insistent than before. It seemed that an automobile was right behind the wagon, clamoring to pass. Almost automatically, Mr. Billers yanked at the reins, and the horses again went to the side of the road. But again, no car went by. Again, Mr. Billers looked behind. Again, to his astonishment, he saw that the roadway was clear. "Hanged if I didn't think I heard a horn," exclaimed Mr. Billers, greatly puzzled as he drove on again. "My ears must be going back on me." But in a few minutes the horn shrieked again. Frank and Joe, who were walking along the sidewalk, keeping abreast of the wagon so not to miss the fun, chuckled as they saw Mr. Billers once more pull on the reins to guide the horses to the roadside. Then the farmer recollected how he'd been fooled on the previous occasion, and he looked quickly around, but there was no car in sight. Mr. Billers gazed down the roadway for a long time. Then he sighed with the air of one whose patience has been long tried. Must be something the matter with my ears, he muttered, and drove on. At this moment, a luxurious sedan swept round a corner and drew up close behind the wagon. There was a chauffeur at the wheel, and he sounded his horn impatiently, for the road was narrow, and he was unable to get past. Lem Billers smiled darkly to himself and paid no attention. "There it goes again," he grumbled. "I must be hearing things. Hang me if I'll turn out any more when there ain't no car there to turn out for." The wagon continued in the center of the road. The chauffeur of the car glared at Lem Billers' back and sounded the horn again. Still the farmer paid no attention. Chet, limp with laughter, almost rolled off the wagon. Frank and Joe could control their mirth no longer and leaned against a telephone post with shouts of glee. The chauffeur, believing that the boys were laughing at him because he could not get past, became purple with anger. He sounded the horn again and again. And finally, when Lem Billers obstinately refused to pay any attention, he looked wildly about for a policeman. As luck would have it, Constable Con Riley was ambling along Main Street at that moment, wondering if it would soon be supper time and hoping his wife would serve corned beef and cabbage that evening. He was aroused from his trance by the chauffeur, who brought the sedan to a stop and ran over to him. "Officer, arrest that man," roared the chauffeur, pointing to Lem Billers. "What for?" demanded Con, taking off his helmet and scratching his head. "Obstructing the traffic. He won't let me pass. I've been sounding my horn for the last 5 minutes, and he won't let me go past." "Oh, said Constable Riley. "He can't get away with that. Not while Con Riley's on the beat." With that, he ran out onto the road, shouting to Lem Billers to stop. At the constable's command, the farmer halted his team and gazed in amazement at the chauffeur and the officer as they came running up to him. "Why won't you let him pass?" demanded the constable. "Don't say you didn't hear me," roared the chauffeur. "I sounded my horn 50 times. "Sure, I heard a horn," admitted Billers. "But," he added triumphantly, "I didn't see no car." "Are you blind?" asked Riley. "There's the car." Then Billers looked behind. At the sight of the sedan, his jaw dropped. "Well, I'll be hanged," he declared sadly. "It must be my eyes going back on me, not my ears. I looked behind 3 times and I couldn't see no car." "Don't believe him, officer," said the chauffeur. "He didn't even turn around." "I did so," contended Mr. Billers. "Well, then why didn't you let me pass?" "Well, you didn't have no car. I heard a horn, but I didn't see no car." Thereupon the argument grew fast and furious. Constable Riley was vastly puzzled. He didn't know what to make of it. Both the chauffeur and Lem Billers appeared to be telling the truth, yet there was something wrong somewhere. He took it all down in a notebook while Mr. Billers and the chauffeur grew angrier and angrier at each other until finally they were on the point of settling the matter with their fists. In the meantime, there was a steadily lengthening line of cars and wagons blocking the street, unable to get past because of the hay wagon and the sedan. A constant chorus of automobile horns sounded. Angry drivers roared at the officer to clear the road. Constable Riley threw up his hands in disgust. "Get on your way, both of you," he commanded. "I can't stand here arguing all afternoon." And while Lem Billers, wondering whether his eyes or his ears had deceived him, drew his horses to the side of the road and muttered strong threats of vengeance against the chauffeur, the traffic tangle gradually abated. When he finally resumed his journey, the Hardy boys could see Chet Morton lying limply in the back of the wagon with tears of laughter running down his face. As for Frank and Joe, they laughed all the way home, and during supper that evening their spasmodic outbursts of chuckles puzzled their parents extremely. End of chapter. Chapter 6. Tire Tracks. Next day was Saturday, and immediately after breakfast, the Hardy boys asked their mother to make up a lunch for them, as they intended to spend the day in the woods with a number of their school chums. Mrs. Hardy quickly made up a generous package of sandwiches, not forgetting to slip in several big slices of the boys' favorite cake, and the boys started out in the bright morning sunshine with a whole holiday before them. They met the other boys, half a dozen in all, on the road at the outskirts of town, and so, whistling and chattering and telling jokes, the group trudged along the dusty highway. Once in a while they would explore along the fences for berry bushes, and occasionally a friendly scuffle would start, to end with both laughing contestants covered with dust. When they reached the crossroads, Chet had not yet appeared, so they rested in the shade of the trees, until at length the chubby youth came panting along the road, his lunch under his arm. "Oh, if only I had my roadster, I wouldn't be late," he said as he came up to them. "I've been so used to it that I've forgotten how long it takes to walk this far." "Well, are we all set?" asked Frank. "Everybody's here," said Chet. "Where are we going?" "What do you say to Willow Grove?" "All those in favor say aye," demanded Chet, and there was a chorus of aye from the crowd. "It's unanimous," Chet decided. "Willow Grove it shall be. Let's go." Willow Grove was about a mile farther on. It was some distance in from the road, and was on the banks of Willow River, from which it got its name. It was an ideal place for a picnic, and as it was somewhat early in the season, it was hardly likely that other parties from the city would be in the grove that day. Frank told the other boys about Chet's adventure with the auto horn, and the story was greeted with shouts of laughter, which were redoubled when Chet told how he had later jumped down from the wagon and run along behind, shouting to Lem Billers to give him a ride. "It was a shame," he confessed. "The poor chap reined in his horses and made me come up and sit on the seat beside him. He asked me if I'd walk very far, and he told me all about his argument with the policeman and the chauffeur, and I could hardly keep my face straight." When the boys reached the lane that led in toward Willow Grove from the main road, they broke into a run and raced into the woods, shouting and yelling like wild Indians. Once in the friendly shade of the trees, they capered about in the joy of their Saturday freedom. Chet took charge of the lunches and stored them in a convenient clearing, and then began the rush for the river. The day passed in the usual fashion of such days. They swam, they ate, they loafed about under the trees, they played games at imminent risk of life and limb, they explored the woods, and otherwise enjoyed themselves with all the happy energy of healthy lads. Joe Hardy, who was an amateur naturalist in his way, went roaming off by himself during the afternoon, while the other boys were enjoying their third swim of the day, and he penetrated deeper into the woods. He poked about in the undergrowth, examining various flowers and plants that came to his attention, but discovered no specimens that he had not seen before. He was just on the point of going back to the other lads, and when he saw before him a small clearing. It was a part of the grove in which he had never been, so he plowed on through the bushes until he found himself in a clearing that appeared to be part of an abandoned roadway. It was in a low-lying part of the grove, and the ground was wet. At one point it was muddy, and in this mud Joe saw something that aroused his curiosity. "Tire tracks, eh? There's been an automobile in here," he muttered to himself. "I wonder how on earth a car could get this far into the woods." Then he remembered his father's remarks on the value of developing his powers of observation, so he went over closer and examined the marks in the mud. "That's a strange tread," he thought. "I've never seen a tire mark quite like that before." He gazed at it until he was sure that if he ever saw a similar auto tread again, he would recognize it. "That just goes to prove that Dad was right," said Joe. "Probably I've seen auto tires like that often, but I've never noticed the markings. Now that I do notice one in particular, it seems strange to me. But I wonder what an automobile was doing in here, how it came to get here in the first place." However, he gave the matter a little further thought and retraced his steps through the woods until he returned to the other boys, who were getting dressed after their swim. "I thought automobiles weren't allowed in Willow Grove," he said casually to Chet Morton. "Oh, then they're not. You have to park just outside the fence." "Well, somebody brought a car right down into the grove." "They couldn't," said Chet. "There's no road." "Well, there's sort of a clearing over there," said Joe, motioning in the direction from which he'd returned. "It looks as if there's been a road at one time." "Well, that's probably the old creek road. It hasn't been used for years." "Well, it was used just this week," he said. "I saw the marks of an automobile tire over there not just 10 minutes ago. And it was a mighty peculiar tread, too, like this. and Joe commenced to draw a replica of the design in the sand, using a thin stick of wood as a pencil. Chet Morton stared. "Why," he exclaimed, "there's only one car in the city that had tires like that." "Whose car?" "Mine," exclaimed Chet, springing to his feet. "Where is this road you found?" Joe Hardy quickly led the way, and all the other boys came trooping along behind, the whole band thrown into a state of great excitement by this unexpected discovery. They all knew that Chet's car was of an unusual make and that the tires were distinctive. When they reached the clearing and Chet had examined the imprint in the mud, he exclaimed, "Oh, there's no mistake about it. My car has been here. No other car in the city has a tread like that." "Perhaps the car is still around here," suggested Frank quickly. "For all we can tell, the thief may have abandoned it and picked this road as a good place to hide it." "It would be an ideal place," agreed Chet. "This road leads off the main highway, and it isn't often used. Let's take a look around anyway." The boys quickly scattered, some taking one side of the road, the rest taking the other. For a while, the search continued without success, but at last Frank and Chet, who were following the abandoned road farther down, gave a simultaneous cry. "Oh, here's a bypath." Before them was a narrow roadway, overgrown with weeds and low bushes that almost hid it from view. It led from the abandoned road into the very depths of the wood. Without hesitation, the two boys plunged into it. The narrow roadway widened out farther on, and then wound about a heavy clump of trees until it came to an end in a wide clearing. And in the clearing stood Chet Morton's lost roadster. "My car!" yelled Chet in delight. His shout was heard by all the other boys, and the sound of snapping twigs and crackling branches soon told Frank and Chet that the others were losing no time in reaching the scene. Chet's delight was boundless. He examined the car with minute care in every particular, while the other boys crowded about it. At last he straightened up with a smile of satisfaction. "She hasn't been damaged a bit, all ready to run. The thief just hid the old bus in here and made a getaway. Come on, fellows, we don't walk back home today. We ride." He clambered into the car, and in a few seconds the engine roared. There was sufficient room in the clearing to permit him to turn the roadster about. When he swung the car around and headed up the bypath, the boys gave a cheer and hastened to clamber on board. Lurching and swaying, the roadster reached the abandoned road, and from there it was an easy run to the main highway. In spite of the fact that it had been left in the bush for probably a week, the roadster was in perfect condition and the engine ran smoothly. Joe was given the seat of honor beside the driver because he discovered the tire tracks that had led to the recovery of the car, and the other boys distributed themselves as best they could. They clung to the running boards, hung precariously to the back, and one lad even straddled the hood. In this manner, the triumphal procession returned to Bayport. But as the cheering lads came down the main street, they noticed there was an unwanted air of excitement in the town. People were standing on the street corners in little groups, talking earnestly, and when the boys spied Detective Smuff of the police force striding along with a portentous frown, they called out to him. "What's on your mind today, Detective? Chet got his car back." "I've got something more important than stolen cars to worry about," declared Detective Smuff. "The Tower Mansion has been robbed." End of episode. Well, the yellow roadster has been found, but now there's a new crime, a robbery. Do you think these events are related? If you subscribe to my newsletter, you get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. And remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.